Very good morning to all of you, and a very warm welcome. Y muy buenos días a todos. We're very honored to count with the presence of all of you here today, and we wish to thank you all very much for it. Most of you have flown from abroad, and we wish to thank you especially for having made the effort to travel all the way to Madrid. So we are today holding this seminar on the future challenges in audit oversight to mark 10 years now of PIOB existence. With this seminar, we wish to celebrate an outstanding achievement with all of you. For 10 years now, international regulators and global public interest organizations gathered in the monitoring group have agreed with IFAC and with the standard setting boards on how the international standard setting system in audit, ethics, and education should evolve to better protect the public interest. All have supported the existence of independent oversight as a key element in this evolving system. Given the complexities and the many and varied sensibilities involved in this world, we think that this is a truly remarkable success. Beyond this celebration, the objective today is to have a good discussion looking forward. After initial panel discussions, the panel moderators will open the floor for questions and comments. The full PIOB board is present here today, in addition to the panelists. The idea is that we would like to listen to your views, to get your guidance on ways forward, how best to continue to implement the PIOB mandate in the next few years ahead. Please do not be shy. At the end of the day, the measure of our success will be the extent by which we can draw conclusions looking forward. So let me thank you now for the contributions that I'm sure you will be making today. So let me very briefly describe what is going to happen today. The opening addresses are going to be delivered now by the Secretary General of the Ministry of Economy and Competitiveness, Mr. González Panizo, and then by the Chairman of the PIOB, Eddie Weimersk. We are then starting at 9:45 a full-day discussion structured around 4 panels, the details of which you have in your registration package in the agenda. There will be 2 panels in the morning, there will be 2 panels in the afternoon, and you will be lucky to get a break for lunch in between. Panel presentations will not take very long, about an hour. Panelists will not take the floor for longer than about 10-15 minutes maximum. And the panels will be followed by a Q&A session that we expect will be very lively, knowing most of you. Those sessions will last about 30 minutes per panel. We expect to finish by 6 o'clock today. And then at 7:30, you're all very welcome to our reception at the PIOB Gardens, which is basically 2 minutes walk away from here. In addition to this seminar, we're marking our 10th anniversary by issuing a commemorative publication with contributions from many of those of you who are present and some of you who have contributed to the PIOB being here today but who couldn't come. The publication has been handed to you in your registration package. Thank you all who have contributed to that. So let me now reiterate our appreciation for your being here today, and let me pass the floor to Mr. Alfredo González Panizo, Secretary General in the Ministry of Economy and Competitiveness, then followed by Mr. Eddie Weimersk. Alfredo.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure to be here today to open this seminar and to mark the 10th anniversary of the Public Interest Oversight Board. Allow me to welcome you all on behalf of the Spanish government. Let me also show you that Spain is very proud to host the PIOB here in Madrid. As you know, the Spanish government, and in particular the Comisión Nacional del Mercado de Valores, the regulatory body of the Spanish stock market, made it possible to set up the PIOB Secretariat here in Madrid in 2006 by making the present PIOB premises available to all the organization. 10 years since, we should all be very proud to see how the support of so many people has materialized into a highly respected international organization, overseeing international standard setting in the fields of audit and assurance, education, and ethics for accountants. I am very happy to announce that a few days ago, the Spanish government renewed its support for the PIOB, and the Comisión Nacional del Mercado de Valores renewed the agreement to continue to host the PIOB in its current premises. The work of the Public Interest Oversight Board during this decade has been of great relevance, and I am sure that in the future it will continue to play a leading role in strengthening and bringing consistency to the financial reporting around the world. I thank the organizers for the invitation and therefore for giving me the opportunity to address such a distinguished and qualified forum of professionals and experts in this relevant sector, in which significant measures have been introduced in recent years, along with a substantial and increasing international convergence in the field. We must, in this regard, acknowledge the link between financial reporting with the financial situation as a whole, and also how recent developments in this area are connected with the global economic situation, namely the global financial crisis, as we will see later, something that will also be debated in the forthcoming and very interesting panels of this seminar. As I have just said, significant measures have been introduced in recent years, which may even lead us to conclude that a real regulatory maelstrom has occurred, with the risk of burdening the activities of auditors. Even so, and in spite of the complexity that may imply adapting to the new rules and the introduction of new requirements and criteria may imply into the daily practice, we must highlight that these measures are indispensable. And we say that they are indispensable to the great importance that a proper and adequate review and verification of annual accounts by auditors has in the public interest, especially in the current context. In fact, the main purpose of all these measures is to reinforce and to add additional guarantees to auditing, to the role of auditors, underlining the undeniable public interest on their activity. In the case of Spain, this is precisely one of the driving factors that lies behind the passing, this very same year, of the brand new law on auditing, Law 22/2015, of 20th of July. This law is, at least in part, the result of the transposition of a directive, Directive 2014/56, of the European Parliament and the Council on statutory audits of annual accounts and consolidated accounts. It also responds to the EU Regulation number 537/2014 of the European Parliament and of the Council on specific requirements regarding statutory audit of public interest entities and repealing Commission Decision 2005/909. This new EU regulatory framework has a concrete background to which I referred before, the financial crisis, which called into question the adequacy and sufficiency of this framework. The European Commission reacted, issuing a green paper in October 2010, called Audit Policy: Lessons from a Crisis, underlining the ideas of the key role of auditing financial stability by assuming the veracity of the financial health and of all the companies. In the debate that followed this green paper, many questions arose, inspiring the proposed changes in the regulation. The Commission itself highlighted, for example, how some large financial institutions just before or during the crisis resulted in clean audit reports when the financial situation was not that clear. The Commission also underlined the need to break or lower the expectation gap between auditors and stakeholders. Further progress towards a greater quality of audits was still possible, the Commission remarked, and clearly stated that its aim was to achieve the highest standard possible to apply in the conduct of audits throughout the European Union. To sum up, the ideas underpinning this reform of the regulatory framework were to improve audit quality in a context of certain lack of confidence on the audited financial statements offered by companies, by the way of increasing the transparency of the work done by auditors, reinforcing independence and professional skepticism, opening the audit market, and finally, improving supervision and its coordination at the international level. Regarding the Spanish law, which is the matter that I'm going to talk about, against this background, Spain undertook the task of adopting a new law on auditing, transposing EU mandates, but taking into account, and I guess that this is important, that some of the aspects now included in the European regulatory framework were already foreseen in our legislation. When drafting the law, a specific transposition approach was adopted, in which we can distinguish requirements for auditors of public interest entities and requirements for non-public interest entities. In the first case, the options allowed by the EU Regulation 537/2014 were exercised, and improvements considered necessary introduced, taking into account the experience in Spain. As for the requirements for auditors of non-public interest entities, the decision was to preserve some requirements currently enforced in Spain, provided they were not in conflict with the directive nor the regulation, and to extend some for the EU regulation requirements to non-public interest entities. The newest aspects that came with the law are related with the following. Number one, the definition of public interest entities. Number two, the increase of transparency throughout different mechanisms. Number three, the independence regime. Number four, stricter requirements for public interest entities auditors. Number five, liberalization measures. And number six, reinforcement of supervision and cooperation. Allow me, and with this I will finish, to explain these new aspects in more detail. Regarding the definition of public interest entities, it is a key aspect of the reform that determines the applicability of the changes introduced both by the European and the national legislation, with more demanding requirements imposed to public interest entities auditors, as we will later see. The new law defines as public interest entities the listed entities, the credit institutions, the insurance undertakings, the entities listed in the alternative investment market, and entities designated by regulation as public interest entities because of its significant relevance, taking into account some criteria like the nature of their business, the size of the number of employees. The second new aspect is the regulation on transparency. The law introduces novelties regarding the audit report, which is now more explanatory. In line with the directive, must include aspects such as an explanation that the audit has been planned and executed in order to obtain reasonable assurance that the annual accounts are free of misstatement, to identify the most significant risk of the existence of material misstatement on the annual accounts, and a summary of the responses of the auditor to those risks, a declaration that no prohibited services nor personal situation that may affect the independence of the auditors concurred, and finally, a review of the management report, and specifically if it is consistent with the final statement and if it has been prepared in accordance with applicable regulation. The third aspect is the increase of auditors' independence, regulating diverse aspects. For the first time, it is regulated the concept of professional skepticism, which implies having a questioning mind and a special alert to any circumstances that may indicate possible misstatement in audit annual accounts. We've also have the incompatibility system, in which we can distinguish two categories. Circumstances arising from personal situation, for example, being a member of the board of the audit entity, being a shareholder, or operating with financial instruments, and in second term, the prohibited services, valuation services, internal audit, legal assessment, among others. There's also a specific regulation regarding financial dependency, which an auditor cannot be hired during the following year if his fees during the 3 previous years represents more than the 30% of the total annual income of the auditor or audit firm. The number four aspect is the stricter requirement for public interest entities auditors. We have a list of 11 services that the auditor cannot provide to public interest entities. There's a specific regulation of financial dependency. Fees in the 3 previous years cannot exceed the 50% of the audit company incomes during this period. There's a specific regulation regarding the audit engagement, a minimum of 3 years, a maximum of 10, that, however, can be extended for additional years in a case of a joint audit. There's also an increase of the information required to the auditors, with an additional report to the auditing committee and an annual transparency report that includes additional financial information, in particular, information regarding the turnover for audit and non-audit services provided to the public interest entities. There's also a regulation of the audit committee. All public interest entities must have an auditing committee. There are some exceptions, like, among others, those companies that have another committee with equivalent functions, like, for example, in Spain, the Internal Control Committee of the savings banks. Regarding the composition, all the members of the committee should be non-executive directors, and a majority, including the chairman, should be independent. The role of the committee is also enlarged. For example, monitoring the independence of external auditor. The fifth measure, or the fifth aspect, is the one regarding liberalization measures, which aim at erasing audit activity barriers and can be highlighted as the following. The first one, the prohibition of contractual clauses that limit or restrict the right to choose auditors, the prohibition of discriminatory criteria in the auditor selection process, for example, excluding auditors of small size, the reduction of burdens for small auditors and audited companies. Certain rules will be applied taking into account the complexity and size of the business and operations of the auditor and the audited company, and certain requirements are simplified. Finally, the reinforcement of the supervision and cooperation measures. The role of the ICAC, the Spanish Institute for Accounting and Auditing, extends, for example, monitoring the evolution of the auditing market, especially regarding the existence of systemic risk and economic concentration. Secondly, the independence of ICAC is enhanced as long as the members of the bodies in charge of the decision-making shouldn't be during a certain period statutory auditors. The cooperation mechanisms are also enhanced with national supervision and with national supervisors and international bodies, such as the European supervisory authorities. Finally, the Comisión Nacional del Mercado de Valores is the responsible authority for monitoring compliance with all the functions of the audit committee in the public interest entities. To conclude, the fact of living in an increasingly globalized economy makes necessary to reform the Spanish audit regulation to converge with the requirements established in the international standards. This is the case of the International Financial Reporting Standards for listed companies and the International Standards on Auditing. It is precisely this public interest that has furthered recent legal reforms, among others the following: the new regulation regarding the internal control system of the external auditor, or the auditor's ongoing training. Independent oversight is necessary for financial markets, as investors want to know that the financial information on which they base their capital allocation decisions is credible and reliable. By overseeing the establishment to high-quality professional standards, international organizations as the PIOB seek to further the international adoption and implementation of such standards and improve the comparability of financial statements across the globe. Finally, and at a national level, the competent authority, the Spanish Institute for Accounting and Auditing, contributes to the goal as official source of local accounting standards and regulations like the recently adopted, as I mentioned before, Spanish audit law, that constitute, I am convinced, a decisive step towards this achievement. Thank you all for all your attendance and participation in the PIOB's 10th anniversary seminar. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I first sincerely welcome all of you who have come this far to the 10th anniversary celebration of the PIOB. We are very grateful for your attendance, which expressed your interest and your attachment to this institution and its work. Indeed, many of you have, and I see many in the room here, have contributed and are contributing to the creation of, or the functioning of the PIOB over the years, and I think that you may be proud of the efforts you have and others have made. Can I take the advantage of this event to address many thanks to some of you who have been so material in the life of the PIOB. First, and very importantly, the Spanish government. The Spanish government has supported the PIOB by providing this very pleasant location, which all of you know, in one of the best neighborhoods of Madrid. I salute Mr. Alfredo González Panezo, Secretary General Técnico of the Ministry of the Economy and Competitiveness, and thank him for his presence here today and for the efforts you and your colleagues have made for the PIOB. Second in my list comes the founding fathers of the PIOB. Several are present here, and I see some, and have contributed to our anniversary publication, and can advise you to read the publication. The creation of the PIOB was the result of their common efforts to respond to the need to convey a stronger standing to the standard-setting process, the pre-existing standard-setting process for accountants, and this has proved to be successful. I come back to the point later on. Further, my thanks to IFAC and its leadership. Their role has been crucial in allowing the new structure to develop and prosper, always conscious of its contribution to the public interest. IFAC's financial contribution allowed and still allows the PIOB to function on a continuous basis. In the same vein, let me also thank the different other financial contributions, among which especially the European Commission, but also of other members of the monitoring group, and also Abu Dhabi Accountability Authority and the UK FRC. Representatives in both cases are present over here. My thanks go also to the different standard-setting boards, because these people have been working extremely hard over the years. They have produced a formidable set of standards that are widely regarded and recognized as the authoritative guides for accountants. I come back to this unique position of these international, indeed worldwide standards. It's very often forgotten that this is worldwide business. My special thanks go to the chairman of the boards and to their staff, with whom we have always had excellent relations, expressing constructive cooperation and dialogue and full understanding of our long-term common objectives. The boards under the PIOB oversight are supported by the valuable advice of the CAGs, the Consultative Advisory Group, standing for permanent consultative mechanism of high caliber experts and indeed of primary stakeholders. As you know, the standard setting structure in the different fields, audit, ethics and education, is overseen by international financial institutions, organized in the monitoring group. The group has been material in directing the operations of the PIOB, overseeing its budget and indicating the ways to go forward. All these participants have cooperated and invested great efforts in developing this unique system of professional standards. The quality of their work is reflected in the worldwide acceptance of the standards, and this notwithstanding, and we should be aware about this, notwithstanding the significant legal, professional, ethical, political, social differences that existed in the countries, the different countries where the standards are being applied. Can I finally also thank the members of the PIOB? They are all in plenum present here, but not all the past members. Unfortunately, we have not been able to secure their participation. Their role in construing the PIOB over time, their strong commitment and the willingness to move the agenda forward has been remarkable and crucial in the development of the PIOB, both internally as an organization and externally as an oversight body. I should not forget, of course, to extend my thanks to the internal organization of the PIOB. That means the Secretary General and his staff, without whom the PIOB would not have been able to function as efficiently as it does today. So this is my series of thanks to many people, and you see the PIOB is the outcome of an effort which has been undertaken by so many people. One of the questions people ask me, and ask you probably from time to time, is, but what is this PIOB? And what is the function of the PIOB? Well, in the future, the answer will be very simple. You can refer to a document that has just been published on the website. It's called, with a very long name, The Standard Setting in the Field of Audit, Assurance, Ethics and Education. But it gives you an overview of the different activities, the different functions, the structure and everything else. It's all quite complicated, I'm sorry, but I can't help it. But it gives you a fantastic insight in the way this business is being organized. So I can refer to the website. But let me now look about something else. There is more to analyze here. The standard setting process for accountants is one of the few examples of effective systems of international standard setting. And I looked at a little bit up how international standard setting for electricity, for all kinds of things, is organized. And you would be astonished. They're all quite different, but this is a unique case. It is often thought that rules cannot be developed in the international space for lack of worldwide regulatory bodies. The main exception is the World Trade Organization, a body that has been effective in enforcing its rules, but is very controversial, as you also know. In these fields, matters have developed differently, and thanks to the intervention of IFAC. Originally, I go back to 2002-2003, the standards were developed within the International Federation of Accountants in internal committees. It was called committees at that time, and were made binding by the professional organizations, the member organizations of IFAC, in which most of the accountants worldwide are represented. It was this professional associative network that ensured the standards to be effectively applied. It was, and it is today, the responsibility of each local professional organization to try to ensure effective adoption and implementation. The reforms, 2002-2006, have strengthened this pattern. Adoption is still largely the task of the local regulator, the local professional association, and I see Russell looking at me, but IFAC makes considerable efforts, and there's his efforts among others, to secure adoption through a specialized body which is called the compliance. And the choice of the word is quite interesting. It's compliance with the organizational rule of IFAC, the Compliance Advisory Panel. The implementation itself is left to the individual accounting firms, but in practice, at least for the PIs, annual accounts must be accompanied by a statement of the auditor in the audit report, and the statement saying reference is made to the international standards. And that's, I think, it's a significant step forward. As the standards were prepared by the professional bodies, there was a concern as to whether they mainly expressed the views of the profession or whether they also reflected the views of their users, of the markets, the investors, the tax authorities, and all other parties that take decisions on the basis of accounts and financial statements. The standards on auditing, ethics, education are developed by the different standard setting boards and should be, in my view, considered a public good, available for all and serving the interest of all participants in the markets. And this led, and this concept of public good, I don't know if it was leading at that moment, but it is certainly something to be identified today. This led to the three-layer structure introduced in 2003. This three-layer structure is based on, on the one hand, the standard setting boards, on the second point, the PIOB, and the third point is the monitoring group. So if the 2003 reforms organized this balance based on the one hand, professional work in the standard setting boards, overseen by an expert body, the PIOB, and monitored by the international financial community in the monitoring group. As far as I know, this is the only case I know where this work has been functioning in these 3 layers. I know that in ISB there is something similar, but it's not really the same. Well, the balances are different. The wide support for this innovation can best be explained by pointing to the need for public confidence in the financial markets. Markets are regularly shaken by incidents that inflict very serious damage on the different direct and indirect stakeholders, but ultimately damage the economic system as a whole. When confidence is shaken, financing of the industry is jeopardized, closures take place, jobs are lost, and ultimately society is in a deep turmoil. We have seen this cause and event several times in the financial crisis. This financial crisis is still not overcome, and more than 7 years after it broke out, we still have a lot of work to do. And we see it in the recent events in one of the European member states, what the damage is that is being done to public confidence. When confidence in the financial statements is lost, the consequences are wide, unpredictable. Think about Lehman Brothers, but in any case, lasting, and we are still living after Lehman Brothers, which was the crux in the last financial crisis. It was with these risks in mind that this 3-layered system of standard setting was introduced, and rightly so. This was also the reason why the PIOB was created, and here I quote the 2003 agreements. The objective of the PIOB is to increase confidence of investors and others that the public interest activities of IFAC, including the standard setting by IFAC boards and committees, are properly responsive to the public interest. I think this says everything what should be said. That means this really clarifies the fundamental function and also positions very clearly the PIOB in the 3-layered system as the intermediate level between the monitoring group and the standard setting boards. Since the standard setting boards were created, several changes, of course, have been introduced to the original scheme. These changes all point to the same direction, and this direction is more independence. The composition of the standard setting boards was changed by introducing a wider diversity in terms of membership. The board should act in full independence, pursuing the public interest, while developing standards that follow the best practice in the sector. If not all members of the board can be expected to be independent, at least the chairperson and several of the members will be expressively independent. The latter are called public members in the sense that they are expected to follow more closely from the angle of the public interest. But other instruments for giving a wider basis to the work of the standard setting boards are the consultations. And the consultations are not only consultations on the exposure draft, which are one-to-one consultations, but there's a continuous process of consultation to the consultative advisory groups. Procedures were streamlined to take all interest into account during the standard setting process. The overall evaluation of this process is widely regarded as a good balance. I think that's quite important that this balance exists between the different interests. As a consequence of the authority of the standards, as a consequence of all this, the authority of the standards has been strengthened. I'll give you a few examples. We still hear from time to time criticism to the present system. The main points relate to the balance of the different interests that are expressed in the standards. It is sometimes perceived that the professional interests play a more prominent role, while the wider societal interests, which although expressed in the consultation process, might receive less attention. The PIOB may try and tries to correct this balance. But it would be more effective if these considerations, these public interest considerations, were included more actively from the outset in the process itself. And I can tell you we are trying to work on that. The drive for independence, I would say objectivity, is underpinning the authority attached to the standards, which are now used worldwide, and we have figures for both ISS and the ethics standards, were or not in their original forms. We must understand that these standards are fixed worldwide, but applied locally and in each jurisdiction, due to all kinds of circumstances, they may take a different shape. However, the European legislator has showed interest in the ISS, International Standards on Auditing, with the intention to declare them, whether or not with modifications, applicable to European audits, provided they have been developed, and I quote here, with due process, public oversight, and are conducive to the public good. So this is exactly what the objectives are in our standard setting system. New issues retain attention along the developments in the markets. One of the most important new developments is the role of information technology, raising numerous new issues that may fundamentally modify the way accountants work. I can only refer here to big data, to cybersecurity, which is in the head of everybody. Equally important is the question whether these standards are effectively transposed. Because it's nice to make standards, but you have to make sure that they are applied. Effectively transposed in the national systems and effectively used in practice. This presupposes accountants worldwide to be educated and trained in these standards and good practices as developed by the education boards, which is, of course, especially in charge of developing standards for the implementation in the education programs. With all this, I think you see that the remit of PIOB is quite wide. It is embedded in the overall structure of the standard setting systems. It is a balance, which of course shifts somewhat from time to time to the left, from time to time to the right, but that's the proper of all balances. I would like to conclude here and say that this three-layer construction for standard setting has established a workable and effective balance between professional and public interest. It is now firmly established and has successfully produced an impressive set of standards. I think the last 10 years have been years of construction. The next 10 years will be the years of full deployment. So I hope that we see each other back in 10 years from now. Thank you very much.